With retirement, you've heard about accumulation, slowly gaining a little bit of cash over time to build up a nice big nest egg for your retirement. Today we're going to talk about decumulation, fellas, and what that really means, I guess, is spending the hard-earned dough that you've saved all these years. This is the fun part, isn't it, David? I mean, let's talk about that.
It is, but it can be the scary part too, right?
Yeah,
so,
for a lot of people, right?
Yeah, that's right, because you're shifting from this thought process that you're going to have this paycheck, and you're moving into no paycheck. I was talking to a buddy of mine who's a lawyer. He happens to like what he does, but he's obviously very nervous about making that shift into retirement, just because you're moving from having a paycheck to relying on what you've got left.
Stuff.
That's all you got, right?
And some government.
And there's a lot of unknowns throughout your life, and this is the first real big unknown that you have to deal with, or one of the big unknowns anyway.
And Jeff, is that the big thing, first of all, realizing that there's no more paycheck coming in? I mean,
well, I think it's a mindset, it's perspective, right? Yeah. Because for most of us, we've always had a paycheck, and that's a bit of a backstop. As you're looking forward and planning to do things, you've got this cash flow, but when you step into retirement, it's gone. And it's getting your head around bringing money in to letting it go. And for a lot of folks who were born in the 30s and those times, it's a real challenge to let go and to say, okay, now I've got to spend some of this money. They tend to want to save it.
Yeah, I want to talk about that a little bit, Dave, because that is a real mindset, isn't it? For a lot of people who've been saving a little bit every year up until they get to retirement, and then now you want them to shift gears and start spending some of that money. Maybe they've already built this mindset that they got to keep saving.
They can't.
It's
stop.
hard to do.
Some people can't. I honestly, I find, especially with the older generation, they have more money. They're still saving while they're in retirement. Right. So I think that it's a challenge. Some people can let go of that, right? And it's and they don't worry about the estate and all that sort of thing. They just focus in on, I want to make sure that we spend as much money as we can, and I don't want to be the richest guy in the graveyard after I'm done, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, how do you shift budgets then, Jeff? How do you sort of adjust your what you're going to spend and that kind of thing?
Well, I think for what you will find is as you get older, your spending will decrease. But it's those first 10, 15 years that you're still quite healthy, and really a lot of it becomes around priorities. A lot of things that you spend on work, the dry cleaning, if that's part of the case, or the work clothes, or the driving back and forth. It's a lot of those things that go away too, and so in a lot of cases, in most cases, people are actually spending a little less on the basics, but it's about spending money on the wants as opposed to needs.
Three things work, if I can interject here. So number one is making sure you got things organized, right? In a way that okay, I'm going to be okay, I'm on track, I'm going to have enough money. The second part is make sure you do some cash flow planning. I think that's very important. A lot of people ignore that, but we run a cash flow navigator with people, and it helps you to identify, really categorize where you're spending your money, and how much generally you're spending, so you know what the nut is to crack every year. I mean, you may not change how you spend your money, but at least you know kind of exactly where you sit. Yeah. And the third part is really doing projections and forecasts. And I try not to go out too long. Typically 10 years is a good time frame, and the reason why is because a lot of things change over retirement. And you've got, if you think back, let's say you retired 20 years ago. I don't know about you, but I wasn't paying a cell phone.
Yeah, or the
that
internet,
was 200.
It's the fear of the unknown that you don't know where the technology is going in the future.
But at the same time, I think you pointed out, you think your telephone bill, it's really gone down quite a bit, right?
Yeah. So new things happen, the internet and things like that. Other things decrease in price, and clothing really, example, it hasn't really gone up much over the last 40 years, for example.
And some retirees don't change their clothing.
No.
Right? So they don't spend money on that.
What would be the one thing you could do to also, I guess, lower your tax implications, for example? Shifting money from RSP to RIF, when would be a time to do that? Using TFSAs, for example. In other words, to give yourself a little more money to spend.
Yeah, well, I think one of the things, and a lot of retirees have sort of caught on to it, is you can income split. So the first thing you do is, regardless of, you take anything that's in the form of a pension, a RIF, or a pension, you can split that between both spouses and lower your tax rate. Certainly, putting funds into a TFSA is another way to do it. But then it's about looking at what kind of investments you're holding in there. If you move money into a TFSA and you've got a 1% money market fund, you're not really saving that much, and it just becomes a process. But if you've got things with higher income rates, it's certainly a good place as well.
Yeah. Now, what do you spend the money on, David? I mean, like, let's say some people, you say, well, you can travel the world, right? But if you've never really been a traveler, you don't really like traveling, it's not going to work, right?
One of the things that we do address in this research project we're about to embark on is the retirement type. So, some people are adventurous where they travel, and that's going to make up a large portion of what they spend money on. And some people are retreaters, and so they just basically want to sort of check out and get, and they're happy with doing things that don't cost money, like, maybe reading, taking a hike. Cycling can cost money depending on the type of bike you have or whatever. Right?
So those guys aren't really spending their money.
That's right. And, and then there are some people that are, what they term as continuers, where, there's 6 different ones, and I won't get into that, but continuer would be somebody who takes on certain phases of their job, and so it's a lot determined by how you spend your time. It would probably determine how you spend your money, right?
For sure, yeah.
And so stepping back to that previous question you asked, I want to say something about it that I think is important. That when you are planning things out, structure and timing of when you take your RIF payments, and also the tools that you have in the toolbox. So, for example, RIF is one tool. TFSA is another tool, but some people have holding companies and they have built up cash in there, and they might have some shareholder loans and so forth that they can take money out tax preferred. And so I think it's important to kind of enter into this phase, having lots of tools to play with that you can, and cash is always king, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I want to ask about leaving some money for the kids, Jeff. I mean, a lot of people want to leave some money for the kids, and there's always the house, I suppose, as part of your investment as well. And some people, they don't want to leave any money for the kids. I mean, I guess, how do you sort of approach that? I mean, the other thing is you don't know when you're going to die, right?
Well, this is true. In a general sense, it seems to be a generational thing. The silent generation, as they call it, is very important to be leaving money to their kids, and to the point where they will actually not spend money on themselves in order to ensure that they have this estate they get to leave the kids. Now, what we're finding is in younger retirees, and I'm generalizing here entirely, there's a tendency to say, well, we'll take care of our life first, and whatever's left, the kids can have. And yeah, the house is always kind of the throw in that we'll spend the money, and they get the house, sort of thing. So that seems to be, it really depends what's important to you. And I think that's, Dave talks about that whole planning piece and understand that that's a part of the process. What's important to me.
And you want to spend the money, like you say, when you're younger and healthier, say 65 to 70, as opposed to when you're 89.
Yeah,
right?
so we, if you break it down into phases, there's pre-retirement, first 5 years where you're trying to figure it out, 5 years to 15 years, typically more active and, traveling. And then once you hit 75, 80 years old, the shift comes more on, am I going to be okay if I'm in a long-term care home? Am I going to have enough money to cover my health care costs? Because that becomes more of an issue. And also, I want to make sure we leave money to the kids or grandchildren or whoever it is that you choose to, right? So they want to make sure there's money left in the kitty.
All right, guys, and if there's people want to see information on your study or anything else to do with retirement, where do they go?
Yourlifeyourplan.ca.